Hi, welcome to the Sankofa Pan-African series. First, have you downloaded your free copy of our children's illustrated biography of African legends yet? Please do so if you haven't. Don't forget that we owe our children a responsibility to expose them to our history. Also, please help us to continue bringing you videos like this one by supporting us through Patreon or by buying me coffee. Please subscribe, share, and like our videos. Our legend today is Margaret Ekpo, teacher, politician, activist. Margaret Ekpo was born on the 27th of July 1914 in Creektown, southeastern Nigeria, to the family of Iyang Eyo Anyemewe and Okoroafo Obisasulo. Her education was cut short after the death of her father in 1934. After her father died, her hopes of attending a teacher's training college was truncated, and she took up employment as a pupil teacher, working at various elementary schools. In 1938, she married a medical practitioner, Dr. John Udo Ekpo. She accompanied him to Ireland in 1944, where she took the opportunity to pursue higher education at the Rathmine School of Domestic Economics. Later, the couple returned to Aba in eastern Nigeria, where her husband worked at Aba General Hospital, while she set up a domestic science training school. By the time they returned to Nigeria in the 1940s, Nigerian women were still not allowed to vote. Even when adult taxpayer suffrage was introduced, women were still excluded. So universal adult suffrage was implemented in Lagos in 1950, but it only rolled out through the rest of the country on a regional basis. So while women in eastern and western regions got the vote in the 1950s, in northern Nigeria, women had to wait until 1979 for the right to vote and stand for election. As with other departments in the colonial service, medical service departments discriminated against Nigerians in terms of promotions, working conditions, and wages. So, for example, government hospitals were built for the colonial officers, and medical services were only accessible by Europeans. In 1945, Mrs. Ekpo's husband, who alongside other medical practitioners suffered under these discriminatory practices of the colonial administrators, could not attend meetings organized by Nigerians to protest against these policies because he was a civil service. But Margaret Ekpo was able to attend. This was only the beginning of her life as an activist and advocate for political and human rights, and she had some really major victories. For example, in 1949, when coal miners in Enugu requested a wage increase, their leaders were shot by colonial administrators for daring to ask for what was their right. Margaret Ekpo rallied women's groups around the country, and they declared a day of national mourning for the shooting victims. This helped draw attention to the incident, not only in Nigeria but across the world. During the demonstrations, Margaret Ekpo was very vocal in condemning the colonial authorities. She even went so far as to declare that if a woman had been among those killed, the British women in Aba would have all been killed. Now, this statement led to her arrest, and she and others who dared to confront the British were harassed and threatened with deportation from their own country, the country of their birth. I mean, there was nothing these colonizers did not do to us. Anyway, in retaliation, the famous Aba women threatened to set the town ablaze, and this forced the colonial administrators to set Mrs. Ekpo and others free. The protests and Mrs. Ekpo's position were parts of growing nationalist movements, the creation of new political parties, and increasing animosity towards the British colonial government. So during her career, Ekpo joined ranks with the prominent Fumilayo Ransome Kuti under the umbrella of the Nigerian Women's Union, NWU. Together, they traveled to different provinces to mobilize women to join the NWU and be a part of Nigeria's decolonization journey. Mrs. Ransome Kuti traveled with Mrs. Ekpo to the Enugu colliery during the crisis at the local at the coal mine in 1949, and they also visited widows of the deceased together. Both women also raised awareness about universal adult suffrage, women's education, and independence from oppressive colonial rule. In 1954, Mrs. Ekpo formed the Aba Township Women's Association, ATWA. Other associations similar to the ATWA also sprang up all over the eastern region as women mobilized to protest their economic and political interests. To encourage women to join ATWA, Mrs. Ekpo devised a particularly clever plan. At the time, the world was just emerging from the end of the Second World War, and there were still shortages of essential commodities, especially salt. Now, Mrs. Ekpo purchased all the bags of salt in Aba Market and therefore controlled its sale to members of ATWA. Any woman who wanted to purchase salt had to first register with the association. This allowed her to mobilize women under one major social political body. It marked Ekpo out as an astute political player. So, other associations such as the Aba Community League and the Aba Market Women's Association joined forces with ATWA to share anti-colonial messages and to mobilize their cohorts towards electoral politics. These mobilization strategies transformed into a formidable women's socio-political movement. Women were able to secure seats at the Aba Urban District Council, breaking the male political monopoly of the local council and securing a voice in local politics. In 1957, Mrs. Ekpo was appointed to the Aba Urban District Council, AUDC Caretaker Committee. The NCNC party's leadership then recognized Ekpo's socio-political negotiation skills, and her name featured regularly on lists of advisors included in delegations representing the eastern region of Nigeria at constitutional conferences held in London and Lagos. It was only the eastern and western region premiers who actually invited a few women to be a part of their delegations. No woman was included in the northern delegations to the constitutional talks throughout the period leading up to Nigeria's independence in 1960. So Ekpo was one of a few well-known female Nigerian politicians representing women's interests in conferences that shaped the country's constitutional future. In January 1959, Mrs. Ekpo was appointed to serve as a special member to the Eastern House of Chiefs, which was a particularly conservative, male-dominated institution. Alongside her was Janet Mokelu. She was one of the only two female members. These were the only two female members, Janet Mokelu and Margaret Ekpo. Her chance to stand for election finally came in 1961, and she won a seat in the regional elections for Aba Union North constituency in the Eastern House of Assembly regional elections. Her mass mobilization of women over the years paid off as women came out to vote for her and Janet Mokelu. She won again in 1963 in the 1963 regional elections. Her second victory inspired other women in the region to participate in electoral politics. Margaret Ekpo remained in the regional assembly until January 15, 1966, when Nigeria's government was overthrown in a military coup. She was bestowed with several national and international awards, including the Order of the Niger, OON, and Commander of the Order of the Federal Republic, CFR. She died at the age of 92 on September 22nd, 2006, and was buried in a special mausoleum built by the state government at the Hawkins Cemetery in Calabar, Cross River State, on December 9th, 2006. As part of the memorialization of her name, the state government renamed Calabar Airport the Margaret Ekpo International Airport. Thanks for watching. Please download your free copy of our children's books and support us through Patreon or by buying me coffee. Also, tell your friends about this channel. Thank you.